And with that, I would like to start with giving the floor to Madam Nargis Nehan to tell us what she feels and thinks about the situation. Madam, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Qureshi. First of all, I have to thank EFSAS for organizing this very timely webinar, which is important. And I'm sure you must have read that yesterday Taliban, they announced their caretaking cabinet, which has been the most exclusive cabinet we have seen in the last 20 years. I was talking to a group of women, and we thought that it's all mullahs inclusive government, but you don't find anybody else in the cabinet. I mean, the situation that has unfolded in Afghanistan had it is domestic, regional, as well as international dimension. The way that things went, as we know very well that we had our domestic issue inside the country. Unfortunately, our leaders could not come together to defend together, united the republic. So as a result, we got to the point that things began to collapse. The national security forces did not have the support and the morale that they required and they needed to have from the leadership of Afghanistan, whether it's within the government or from other politicians. And the rampant corruption that we had, the impunity that we had in the system, and the way that the system was turning into a dictatorship. That those of us that, for example, I tell October 2019 that I served in the system, when even we began to raise our voice against what was going on in the system actually even began to come after all of us. So the system was becoming close and close, and people were becoming very frustrated. And literally, while people were very much worried of Taliban taking over, but also they had no motivation of defending the republic, both the civilians and as well as the national security forces. In the meantime, as we all know very well, that we do need to have a regional consensus, but we could not build that regional consensus. Why the Americans tried to do that, they had several of round of meetings and travel by Ambassador Khalizad, but that we could not get to any kind of regional consensus. Everybody wanted to dominate the regional politics when it was coming to peace process in Afghanistan. And internationally, several times I had meeting with the Europeans and we were asking what is happening, the peace process, the information. There were times that the European ambassador was actually asking us, can you tell us what is going on? Because Americans are not sharing with us what's happening. So the Doha agreement that actually signed, it boosted the confidence of the Taliban. On top of that, the competition that we had between the countries and as well as within Afghanistan, everybody trying to make their own link with the Taliban, basically give this confidence boost to the Taliban that they thought, okay, we have one door, everybody wants to work with us. So why should we care about the peace process? We can just play with the time until the time comes that we take everything militarily. So unfortunately, it was not a process that would have taken us to the process, and as someone that I have worked in the system, I could foresee that things will fall out, but I never thought that it's going to fall out so quickly. So things fell down and we are all very much shocked because especially for our national security forces, look, 66,000 people sacrificed their life in our national security forces in the last 20 years, not for the day that everything will collapse so easily. And everybody would blame them for that why they didn't fight without understanding what was happening in the system. And even right now, what we see that while women are going on the streets and they are demonstrating for their rights, they are demonstrating for their rights to work, their rights to political participation, their rights to the government, we keep on hearing from the international community that they are just waiting and watching because they think that we should not challenge Taliban. We should help Taliban to actually have a successful government because otherwise it's going to become more disaster. Even when they went and one of the provinces, only one province that actually decided to resist the capture of Taliban. And while we all know very well that one of the neighboring countries is helping them very much, still while group of us are talking with different embassies, with different organizations, and we're telling them that you need to intervene, you need to raise your voice, we didn't hear anything. I just had to give an interview today in the morning where during my interview, the of the statements that EU ambassador actually had made in Brussels just 1 week before, and they said that don't listen to all these alarming news that you're hearing from Afghanistan, because those alarms are coming to you based on what people have seen the Taliban 20 years back. We need to give time to the Taliban that they form their government, and then based on that we have to see how we engage with them, and it's too early to be so scared or worried of Taliban. But look at their policy that they have just adopted about the higher education. They opened the institutions, but we see that already they came up with very restrictive policies, that the classes should be separated, there should be separate ways for girls and boys, there should be separate waiting room. Then on top of that, women went for a peaceful demonstration on the streets. They started shooting at them, and we lost several lives yesterday, especially in Herat. And then when the cabinet that they formed, while they talk with the people, you see that this is the most exclusive government. So this is the situation, and we as Afghans are very disappointed with the policy that the world has adopted, which is waiting and watching. We think that they have to proactively engage with the Taliban and make the Taliban realize that this is not going to work, especially in Afghanistan. Winning a war from a very unpopular government was one thing, but governing a very diverse and quite high demanding nation is going to be something very different. And I'm sure everybody underestimated our civic awareness. They say that, oh, Taliban will come and take over, everything is going to be fine. There are a few women in the urban area. If they are evacuated, there's nobody else going to raise their voice. But look, do you have thousands of women on the streets now that they're asking for their rights? These are not those elites that you were talking about. So the Afghan people have changed, the generations have changed, they have different expectations. We are connected with the rest of the world. Whatever is happening to Afghanistan is not going to be limited to Afghanistan. But on top of that, what we see an absolute dead quietness and silence all around the world. They're just waiting and watching. And I'm just thinking that, what else we're waiting for to see what is happening, the catastrophe that's happening in Afghanistan, so that at least you can raise your voice and you can do something about it. Because other than that, we really don't know what to do. We are talking with the UN, we talk to different embassies. Every one of them are telling us that let's try to help Taliban to actually govern the country. We try to help them, we try to advise them, but they don't listen to anybody. And the examples that they have adopted several policies, the way that they have responded to people's demonstration, the way that they have formed the cabinet speaks volumes that they have not changed. Afghanistan has changed a lot, Afghan society has changed, but Taliban has not changed. I want to stop it here, and if there is another round, then I will be interested to and willing to add up on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Nehan. Thank you for your very passionate speech, and also explaining the ground situation which is currently unfolding in Afghanistan. And as rightly said by you, they have indeed announced the interim government, and we were just talking before you came online, is that I think out of the 33 members of that interim government, 17 are listed on UN designated terrorist list. Apart from that, there is no woman in that interim government, and they have also excluded all minorities in Afghanistan. So indeed, the Taliban does not listen. So thank you for your speech. And before we go to the next speakers, I had, after just Madam Nehan finished, I had a few questions, and those are particularly addressed to her, I believe, because they came just after her speech, although there's no name written. First, we have a question from Oliver Brown from Chatham House, and he asked, given the dire humanitarian situation, what conditions, if any, do you think foreign donors should place on the provision of emergency aid? That's one. And then there is a second question, which comes from Katharina Hartman of Alp Analytica, and she asks, how might development or humanitarian programs be designed in a way that supports peace and stability in Afghanistan? So the first one has to do, should there be any provisions to provide that aid, and how? And the second one is, how might that development and humanitarian programs be designed? So I'll just, before we move on, give the floor to Madam Nehan to answer that.
Thank you very much. So to answer the first question, in terms of condition, Engagement with the Taliban should be there, but I don't think there should be recognition of their government. And in terms of engagement, provision of conditional support is important. And already the previous government had come with very restrictive policies trying to have more control over non-governmental organizations, and mainly the organizations that they were doing advocacy. So I think provision of support is important. That should be channeled off the budget and should be channeled through the non-governmental organizations. But then also talking to the Taliban that we are providing these humanitarian support to Afghanistan, and they should be engaged in a way, because the demand was going to be, the pressure is going to be on the Taliban, because that's what people have begun to live and have begun to actually accept as a norm, expecting basic services from the government, whether we are talking about education, humanitarian, emergency support, or health support. So that still could continue with the government, but should be more in collaboration with the government rather than everything being controlled by the government, so that they can have less influence, less control over provision of humanitarian support. And in terms of design, I mean, we are a country that, and a society that we have been in conflict for the past, for the last 4 decades. So we have a lot of social conflicts, we have a lot of social issues, and that we need to address, regardless of who is going to govern the country, whether Taliban, any other group, or others. So provision, the programs that are designed, all of them should include one component that should focus on social peace. And do no harm is very much important. We have many programs designed and implemented in the last 20 years that unfortunately they have been very counterproductive. They have created more conflicts at the community level, even at the political level, than supporting cohesion inside Afghanistan. So cohesion should be there. Building cohesion at the community level, at the political level in Afghanistan should be the goal for all of us. And we should design our program in a way, in full consultation with Afghans, that will not harm the cohesion that we are trying to build. And on top of that, will also respond to the need that we're having on the ground. I hope I had answered those questions. And with regard to humanitarian support, that the crisis that we have right now, what we also are hearing that while the support is going inside Afghanistan, the roads are blocked to Panjshir. People are starving, and the Taliban are going from door to door. And I'm sure that you're hearing that they're basically punishing the civilians because of the resistance group. That we already talked to UNAMA, we already talked to many other international organizations. We called for their immediate intervention, and we said you need to find some way to stop that. So we think that still the world needs to step in. We need to convince both sides that they need to stop the current fighting that's going on. And Taliban needs to, should allow the emergency support that should go to Panjshir. They should let the communication lines get open back on Panjshir. And on top of that, they should begin to have talk with the Panjshir, with the resistance, rather than going on and talking. And of course, I'm sure both the Taliban and as well as ISI and Pakistan, if you say, already have seen reaction of the people on visit of the head of ISI, that people did not take, that didn't go very well with them. And I think that actually backfired. While they tried to send the message to the world that they're in control of Afghanistan, the reaction that we had from the people also communicated to the world that people are not happy. And that's what their reaction is, that they don't want to be occupied once again, like by Pakistan. So I think this is something, a narrative that we need to promote, that Afghan people do not want occupation of anybody, invasion of anybody, interference of anybody. Pakistan need to stop that, the way that they're closely working with the Taliban, especially when it comes to bombing and drone Panjshir. And on top of that, we need to step in and convince both sides that they should stop talk, and provision of humanitarian support in Panjshir should start as soon as possible.
Thank you, Madam Nehan. Just to follow up on that question, which is also regarding your speech, is, and I think you have given the answer in what you just answered now, but the question is constructive engagement or confrontation the better way of dealing with the Taliban on behalf of foreign governments, and especially regarding Panjshir? So I think you gave half the answer you've given, that it should be constructive engagement, but with a lot of ifs and buts. But what do you think about the confrontation if that doesn't work?
I think perhaps, sometimes with a group like Taliban, a combination of might be more effective. While the resistance have gone confrontational, I think it's good because we didn't want to basically prove to the Taliban the claim that they had that people love them, people support them, and people want them to govern. So when we had the resistance coming from Panjshir, especially from women group from different parts of the country, that communicated and that proved that point that they were trying to make wrong. So I think that should continue, and we should find different ways to provide those support to those groups that they're resisting Taliban, even if that's confrontation, as long as it's not getting violence. Secondly, constructive engagement in terms of world. I think they have to proactively constructively engage with them rather than reactively. Right now, what we are seeing that they're waiting and watching to see what is happening, what Taliban is doing, and then we'll decide to engage with them. And instead of that, they can proactively and constructively engage with them and tell them very clearly that, look, if you think that like the previous administration, you come with bags of promises to us and you don't deliver anything, it's not going to work anymore. And they should be very serious about it. Because I remember that few times when I talked to some of the Taliban members, and I said that, look, you're saying that your foot, and I understand the dilemma of the Taliban. They're having the different demand from their foot soldiers that they want strict implementation of Sharia law. On the other hand, they have demand from the international community and from the citizens of Afghanistan that they want a free Afghanistan. So balancing that is becoming very difficult for them. And I'm sure you're hearing about the vertical, horizontal discollusion that right now is happening and disagreement that's happening among the Taliban group. So constructive engagement is important, but with what that has to be very consistent, that has to be very united, and the world need to stop talking and trying to open their own channel of communication, every one of them individually with Taliban, because then they're going to start to manipulate things. They should come together through one platform. They should communicate very clearly and tell them that, look, these are our conditions. Either you need to meet them and we're going to collaborate with you. Otherwise, we will provide humanitarian support to the people of Afghanistan, but we are not going to collaborate with you as a government. And I think for that, consistency is very much important, because I remember one of the Taliban members once, he told me, he said, look, your own government, at that time, the government was in place, things had not fallen. So he told me, he said, your government had promised to the world about fighting corruption, impunity, women's rights, everything, many things in the last 20 years, they didn't deliver anything. Has the world stopped their support to Afghanistan? No, they haven't stopped it. So in our case also, we are going to go ahead. We have learned the politics now. We are going to make a lot of promises, but at the end of the day, we are going to do some cosmetic implementation here and there. But fundamentally, we are going to do what we want to do. So I think we need to change that impression once again and prove Taliban wrong. But that can happen only when there is a unity, consistency, and political will at the international community side.
Thank you. Those are, I think, very valid and very genuine concerns you're expressing, and also solutions you're giving that the world needs to come together, maybe in a platform and not separately engage. Because you saw after the Taliban took over, separate countries, even European countries, flying to Doha and then having the next flight to Islamabad, but not flying to Kabul. To speak with the people over there on the ground. And that's maybe what is amiss in this whole conflict, that the real voices on the ground are not being heard.